Hey guys, it's Kip with DT4 EMS and a very special episode of Chronicles of a Culture Changer. I heard Mohammed's story through a mutual friend, and the headlines read, former EMT stabbed in the heart, walks to the hospital. And so I'm thinking, oh my God, he's stabbed in the heart and walks to the hospital. And our mutual friend ended up reaching out and connected Mohammed and I. And I've talked to him a couple of times before we were able to get this interview formally on video. And I think he's got some really important survival story skills and some mindset things that he can share with us today that are important for everyone and not just those of us in EMS, fire, and nursing. But without further ado, I'm going to ask Mohammed to tell a little bit about himself and like his experience and, just normal stuff. And then we'll kind of flash forward to the stabbing. So here he is, Mohammed Ramirez.
All right, guys. Hello. 35 years old. As Kip said, yeah, I got stabbed in the heart. I guess we'll get to that. A little bit about myself. Been a martial artist ever since I was about 19 years old. Studied for quite some time, obviously. And what else can I tell you about myself? I'm also a musician, stuff like that.
And you have a new baby. You have a new baby.
Yes, and I have a 2-month-old baby that she was born on the same day that I was basically dying.
And so you had some experience as an EMT, correct?
Yes, I worked for North Shore LIJ for close to 6 years, about 5 years and a half. 911. I have experience doing 911.
And as a martial artist, what again, people like me, I'm, with the exception of like the mindset side, I'm only training 2 or 3 days a week right now, the best I can get. But I'm technically a martial hobbyist because I don't train a whole bunch like what I would consider a professional guy that trains regularly. What type of stuff did you train in?
Okay, so I started out with martial art called Jeet Kune Do for 9 years. I studied under this guy named Guru Nick Sokolis in this place called Progressive Martial Arts Academy. He was trained by Danny Inosanto, Bruce Lee's best friend and assistant instructor. I trained there for 9 years. I also trained Muay Thai for several years. I also trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I traveled to Thailand to fight Muay Thai, and I went to one of the best MMA camps in the world. It's actually the 3rd best MMA camp in the world, called Phuket Top Team, and I trained there for quite some time. And I used to train there 6 to 7 hours a day, every single day.
That's incredible. And what's your height and weight? So what's your size?
So I'm not relatively a huge guy. I'm 5'4", and right now, because of the stabbing, I weigh 112. I just weighed myself about 2 days ago, so I lost a lot of weight. I was at 125, 130.
That's and it doesn't take that long because it's only 2 months out since you were stabbed.
Yep.
And here's we talked, and I'm sure as people listen to us discuss things here over the next however long we're able to go, but you struck me as like a regular guy, and it's like a pretty cool dude. It's like somebody that, here I would think that we were getting on the phone and we were only going to talk for 10 or 15 minutes. The next thing I know, we're on the phone for like 2 hours at a time. Would you? So,
yeah.
You strike me as just an overall good dude. So it's not that you don't have any training. You obviously have a bunch of training, and we've talked before, you kind of have some passions like I do with the, Filipino martial arts with stick and knife work and the striking art of Muay Thai and of course the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
But, you were attacked by surprise, correct?
I was attacked actually on the left side. What it is I'm also blind from my left side. A stick had struck me when I was about 8 years old, which caused me to be blind in my left side.
And you told me this, which it's still hard for me to believe because as I look at the video, your prosthetic eye is like, I can't tell.
Yeah.
That's crazy good at how far we've come, with that type of technology even. So not only were you attacked by surprise, but then the person came up on your blind side, correct?
On my blind side, not even knowing that him attacking me on that side, he would have an advantage.
Yeah, because, so we don't have to talk a bunch about how you got to this point, but we you were telling me that you kind of like were around the side of like a van, and you were with
Yes.
someone else or something. You guys were kind of talking, and because
Yes.
your baby was about to be born, right?
Yeah.
So you
Exactly.
guys were kind of like celebrating and visiting for just a moment before you went on to the hospital and things like that, and for the baby, not for being stabbed. Um,
Of
Take me
course.
to that moment at the van where we were kind of like, you were visiting with him, and then all of a sudden, what's the
Yes. What happened was, I remember it like it was yesterday, Kip. I'm hanging out with this friend. We had a couple of beers. I was ready, like you said, to go see my baby being born. So I was a little excited, anxious, all the things that I guess go with fatherhood. It's my first child. Um, so I was there with him talking. I was around, I think I would say around my third, fourth beer. And I was all right, dude. It's time for me to go. It's time for me to, go see my girlfriend have this baby. I was excited. I was about to leave. As soon as I'm about to leave, I'm standing with my back against a van, and my friend is by my left hand side, on my blind side, and we're talking. I'm laughing, ready, just about to leave, and this guy just pops out of the woodworks around the van, went around the van, and strike me first. And he was actually in his peripheral. He was the first guy you would see. But for whatever the reason was, he decided to attack me. He came up to me and he said, "Hey, you're part of ABK, which is a gang out here, Elmhurst gang, because that's where I reside in Elmhurst, Queens. And there's a gang war going on with Latin Kings and ABK." So he just stabbed me directly in the chest. When that happened, I put my hands up to fight because it felt like somebody sucker punched me, but really lightly. When I looked down, I saw this knife sticking in my chest. Right away, something said, "You know what? You better start rushing to the hospital." Because as my EMT training, I know whatever wound it is, especially a wound of that sort, that it's crucial for you to move right away. It's not something for you to play with.
yeah,
So I decided to start walking.
yeah, because at first, like we had talked before, it's I'm sure that being struck so many times through kickboxing or having other feelings through some form of martial arts training is why it felt more like just a punch to the chest that your brain kind of went because a lot of times people don't have any idea that they were stabbed. That's normally what we hear, that there was no idea a knife was even in play until you look down and now you noticed it, and then so you start. You realize at that moment, then correct me if I'm wrong, that now's not the time to stay and fight, that you better
Yeah.
create some distance, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I did. As a man, I wanted to fight because that's obviously probably what we want to do. I wanted to defend myself, but yeah, I knew that it was not the time to fight. That it would be a losing battle. Yeah, and I remember the knife being stuck in me, and I had to move fast. When I started to walk away, my friend still stayed. And then afterwards, he told me that whatever they proceeded to tell him the same thing. He had to run for his life because there
Sure.
was four of them. There wasn't not one of them. Only I got struck by one. Go ahead, Skip.
And I hope your friend realizes that in a situation like that, outnumbered, your buddy's already been stabbed. I mean, there is nothing, and I use the similar example of, if let's say you and I are partners on an ambulance, and like has occurred in the past, one person gets off the truck, comes around the corner, grabs the rescue bag, and then turns. Well, all of a sudden, let's say I catch a bullet, and so boom, somebody shot me and dropped me. Well, if it's a sniper or an attacker, what they want is more bodies. I might be screaming for help, but what we definitely don't want to occur is for you to get out of the truck and come around and try to, get shot yourself. And so I want you and all these other people that may be watching this, or even your friend, that, man, there's no ill will, because if somebody says, well, I should have stayed and fought, shut up. You need to understand that there are times to not be there. And this is the difference between winning, because you live, versus staying and, quite possibly die. Because at this point, you have no idea how bad the injury is, correct?
Of course, and yeah, you're right.
And So because the headline comes across with, former EMT is stabbed and walks to the hospital. There is some truth to that, but then there is something that occurred as you're leaving, right? I mean, because you didn't, was it 2 blocks, 3 blocks? I mean, how far was it to the hospital?
Let me see. It was about 4 blocks to the hospital. Yeah, it was about 4 or 5 blocks. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken.
And because so as you're leaving, how did you get to the hospital? How did you get?
So as I'm leaving, as this knife is stuck in my chest, like I said, I realized I had to move. The first thing we learn as EMT is do not take the object out. But whatever it was, out of pure instinct, rather, I pulled out the knife out of my chest. Once I pulled out the knife out of my chest, it started to register in my head, like, dude, you just been stabbed. You better start moving. I saw the hole in my chest, and I started to bleed out. Once I started to bleed out, I applied pressure as I was taught as an EMT. Done this several times. Everything seemed surreal, seemed unreal to me, as if it was a dream. Like this couldn't possibly be happening to me. Then I started walking towards the hospital.
And for anybody that kind of goes, well, he should have known better as an EMT not to take that out. Does anybody remember the crocodile hunter? Right? Remember, how did he die? How did Steve Irwin die? Right? Gets barb in the heart from a stingray underwater, and what does his instinct make him do right off the bat is pull it out, right? So acting as a human is one of the things that these educational videos are supposed to be about, is that people kind of go, oh my gosh, so humans do certain things at certain times, and we want to try to prepare ourselves to maybe perform a little bit better, or should we find ourselves in that type of situation. So there's, again, dude, no shame. I mean, again, we've all done stuff to ourselves where we look back going, man, I really shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But, so if right now you're saying it was surreal, it didn't seem, you're like, this can't be happening. Was there any change in speed? Was there any change in what you heard or couldn't hear or saw or couldn't see? I mean, how do you think you were really feeling? So when you're saying it was surreal, could you describe it to people?
So my perception, I guess that would be the right word to use. My perception at that moment in time was sort of like, it's kind of funny how we look at The Matrix, the movie, and you see the guy dodging bullets and stuff like that. Well, that's kind of where I was at. That's where my head was at. Everything seemed to focus just 100% on myself. And, slowly but surely, I started to come to realization of you just might die.
So,
but everything stopped.
Oh, okay. That's what I was trying to find out, is that if it seemed like things sped up, or did they slow down? And then, was it an eternity in which you thought about things in your brain, when it, in all actuality, was a few seconds, or was it normal? I mean, like you said, it was the Matrix. So did you feel like you were the person in the Matrix, and that you were like,
yes,
going, holy crap. Again,
yeah,
that's,
I did feel, I felt like I was, like I was the one in the Matrix. It seemed like time had completely slowed down. That's the best way I can describe it. That's exactly what it felt like, and it seemed like what you said, like an eternity, for me to get out of the situation that I was.
And so at this time, man, I mean, you've pulled the knife out. You're realizing, holy crap, I've been stabbed in the chest, and you thought, you said a minute ago, you thought, man, maybe I could die.
Yep.
I mean, were you saying, and a lot of times people they say things or think things, or you hear them describe different emotions or thought processes or whatever when they're faced with a true life or death situation, or a potentially lethal encounter, whether it was a car wreck or being attacked by a shark. I mean, it's we're human, and so we have certain things that go on. What do you have anything specific that that your brain is thinking of?
Well, what I can tell you, Kip, is that for whatever the reason was, it has to be the EMT training, that it's so ingrained in us. As EMT, as a paramedic, you don't want to panic in any situation, whatever it is, when you're doing CPR, and your first initial reaction is to panic when you first start to do the job. But in that moment, something told me to just be very calm, because panicking would not help. I don't know where it came from, but that's initially what was going on in my head.
Okay.
To just be very controlled.
And as you look back, do you think that you were overall you were pretty controlled with the chaos that had just happened?
I was, and I was, and as I continue to tell you the story, you can see how calm I was. May I continue?
Sure. Yeah.
So once I pulled out the knife, I started heading towards the hospital. As I'm going towards the hospital, I know the headline said that I walked all the way there. That's not true. I did not walk all the way there. On the way there, getting close to the hospital, a friend winded up seeing me, and he saw me walking a little bit funny. So he asked me, Mohammed, what's going on? And I said, dude, I just been stabbed, man. And he was like, get out of here, because I was very calm, like I said. So he couldn't believe it. Once I showed him the wound, he was like, oh my God, man, we got to get you to the hospital. He put me in his car and we started going towards the hospital. I remember being in the car, and like I said, everything seemed like it slowed down, but like it was just taking forever. And I guess in his nervous state, he winded up taking the long route to the hospital actually. And on my way, as I'm in the car, I'm thinking in my head, I remember it like yesterday, I'm thinking in my head, why the hell is this guy taking the long route? I'm over here bleeding out, and this guy's gonna definitely wind up having me killed, man. So I remember when I got to the hospital, I wind up going into the emergency room. I looked at the nurse and the doctor, and they know me, from being an EMT, and they looked at me like I was joking. And they said, what's going on? And I said, well, I've been stabbed. And they said, no way. And I said, yes, I am. When I showed them the wound, that's when they really started speeding things up.
And do you remember anything about, like, say, the expressions of anybody, like your friend that picked you up, or the people at the hospital? I mean, what was their expression like? Did they go from because you were kind of describing it, but was it that they kind of went from like a disbelief look to holy, were you able to see those things, or did that stick out?
Well, the guy in the car that drove me there, his initial reaction was, oh my God, this guy's actually telling the truth. This is not a joking matter. And I can tell by the way he was driving in his nervous state that he knew that my life was pretty much in his hands at that very moment. And then the doctor and the nurse, they also looked at me with that expression of, wow, this is real.
It's interesting. Two different times. And again, those know I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, or anything else. I mean, I was a police officer. But two times you were very specific about how nervous he was driving. So in that, it tells me that that was something that really captured your attention, because there things were changing, because then your brain was like, holy crap, he recognizes how bad this is, because here is your friend who is driving in an extremely nervous state, because again, it stood out to you. I mean, you're the dude stabbed, and what you they can take us a long way around, and look how scared he is. So see, isn't that something, how our brain processes info? I mean, I think that's very cool, that again, you're the one potentially dying, but because you still at this point now didn't know that it was in your heart, right? You had no idea that it had been stabbed.
No, I had no idea. The only thing is to be honest with you, I'm thinking when I got to the hospital, like, to me, it was just like, okay, I just got stabbed in the chest. It didn't really register in my head how serious it was.
Still no pain. Still no real pain.
Because I didn't really feel any pain. I didn't feel no pain. Like I said, I didn't feel the knife going in, and when I pulled it out, I didn't feel it when I pulled it out. So the pain had not registered in my head, nor did it register, anywhere that I remember when I was in that condition. I didn't feel any pain whatsoever.
So they've, the doctor and nurses are now taking it serious, and what happens next?
So what happens next is, as they're putting me on the stretcher to get me ready to go into operation, I see the doctor, he's frantic, like, they're taught to be calm, but he knew that my life was in his hands, and all of them did. So I can remember the expressions on their face, like, we better start moving fast. And I remember they were talking, in their doctor lingo, which we also have the same lingo, but they didn't know, I guess the doctor didn't know that I was an EMT. It really doesn't matter. But what they were saying was to the extent of was that I was not gonna survive, pretty much. That I was pretty much done, man. That that's what
So,
that's what I remember.
um, what's the last thing that you recall before surgery, and then what's the next thing that you recall after surgery?
So the last thing I recall was I remember the doctor pretty much telling me that I was gonna have to undergo surgery. He didn't tell me that it was heart surgery at all. He just said, you're gonna undergo surgery, and I hope to see you, and I hope, pretty much you're alive when we're done. It didn't really register in my head because once again, to me, it wasn't really all that serious. The last thing I do remember was, I guess, with all the narcotics that they had shot me up with, I was feeling so dopey that I remember seeing my parents, looking at me as I'm gonna go into surgery.
And were your parents there?
They
Oh,
had arrived, and then I went into surgery. So I remember, seeing them, and I remember in my head thinking to myself, this really just might be the end. I hope it's not.
and so you go through surgery, and thank God it turned out well. And what's the first thing that you can really recall after surgery?
So after surgery, I remember getting up from the bed. I felt weak, super weak, no strength. I was a bit hungry, and I wanted to get up out of the bed initially. And I tried to like get up out of bed, and I feel these big chest tubes on my side. So my initial reaction was to look down, and I see these big, big, big chest tubes. And I'm like, what in the world? And then I remember the doctor came up to check up on me, and he told me, that I had heart surgery. Um, that the knife had pierced or had touched my right ventricle of my heart. So he said that it was pretty much a serious matter. And he pretty much told me, I could see on the look on his face. Doctors don't really say this too much, but he pretty much said, you are a miracle, man. I can't believe you're talking to me right now. And they were perplexed, um, you know, because I was alive. Like he was expecting me to die.
I'll be honest, when I heard this story, and again, because of the mutual friend who is someone that, while I don't know him necessarily personally, we have communicated back and forth a little bit over, because he's also an experienced provider, but he's a no BS kind of a dude. And so when we were kind of like, talking about your story back and forth, and then, I was the same way. I'm like, wait a minute. This is incredible that you're alive. I mean, here you were attacked by surprise, this whole, random act of violence because you weren't even involved in it. You're not a gang member, and it's like, all of this is occurring at the same time now that your baby is being born, correct?
Yes, yeah. And the greatest thing, like you just said, is that as I'm dying, because the doctors, when they came and they did the EKG, the heart person, the heart technician or the EKG tech, they came up to me. The lady looked at the EKG, and I remember her looking at the strip. And it's funny because she was like, "Wait a minute, you're in an acute myocardial infarction." And I said, "Really?"
It was,
So I'm having a heart attack right now. And she laughed and she said, "No, not right now, but it shows that you are." Because initially what happened was when I was undergoing surgery, I went into cardiac arrest. I don't remember any of that, but I did initially die.
wow. Um, and then, so how has it been, as you kind of continue the healing process? Because this has only been like 2 months ago. Um,
Yeah.
how I mean, how are things? I mean, if we had to be honest, which I want you to be honest, because that's how we all learn. But I mean, what do you have any trouble sleeping? Do you not like crowds? I mean, or is everything hunky dory? I mean, how are you dealing with just general life right now?
Well, the first, like you said, we are in the 2 month mark. However, I would say the first month or the first month and a half was honestly the hardest for me because paranoia started to kick in. Like I thought everything would be just the same as it was, but right after surgery, I started having these thoughts like, listen, you just had surgery, you're a sitting duck. You can't do anything. If you weren't able to defend yourself at that time with all your training, now that you had surgery, you're definitely a sitting duck now. So there is a lot of paranoia that came along with it. I haven't seen a specialist for it. Uh, but yeah, that's definitely some things. Like for instance, I'll tell you today, I was with a friend. I went to a meeting and, I'm talking to my friend in front of my building and I'm looking around. Like I'm always very aware of my surroundings even more now. And he looked at me and he said, "Is everything okay, Mohammed?" And I said, "Yeah, everything's okay, man. But I'm just making sure that everything's all right." So there still is a sense of paranoia from what happened.
And I will tell you again, even from my experience as well, that is not uncommon. And hopefully, you do talk to somebody about it, because what we want to do is the more, just like Jessica, the girl that was stabbed 105 times while doing that triage of the psych guy. If we, and I say we, if any of us move early to stave off things, we're not as likely to suffer, really bad stuff down the road when it's too late. We haven't, we don't recognize, we don't acknowledge. I mean, when my ambulance was carjacked, it was like, oh, that's part of it. Nobody, I didn't want to talk about it. It was, no biggie. And then you start compiling these things, and it's not until all of a sudden you look back. And I think you and I were talking about this a week or so ago, but that, you find yourself escaping into a bottle to sleep, or, start withdrawing from friends. And then all this little stuff starts making you angry. And, like you, dude, I love people. I love life. I trained all the time. And yet, I didn't recognize my outlook changing to that everybody was evil. And, hopefully, people listening to your story and they've suffered, something, at least that they'll look and go, well, okay, so maybe the things that I'm feeling aren't abnormal. You know what I mean? That they're not alone in whatever it is that they're experiencing. But let's continue with the positive stuff. So, it's a miracle. You're alive. They had chest tubes, and I'm assuming you've got all kinds of, scars and stuff like that from where you were
Oh, yeah, I have a beautiful scar right here if you can see it.
Oh man, so they did a whole, they cracked your chest, cracked your chest.
Yeah, 100%. They went into the chest. They told me they had to completely break it. So the breastbone is coming back, and it's painful, very, very painful. When I get up, like when I get upright, I still feel like the stitches inside, holding it together. So I'm a little weary of doing things, like I was telling you before, but I know it will get better, man. It will get better.
Absolutely. And like I said, from our talks over the last few times, it sounds like you just have a great outlook on a lot of stuff. What, if you had any advice for, let's say, an EMT, a paramedic, or a nurse, even though yours didn't occur on the job per se, you were still attacked by surprise. Is there any advice, anything that comes to your mind that you could go, that you want to pass on to somebody that might find themselves in a life-threatening situation from being stabbed?
So what I can say from all of this that I gathered and my experience is that no matter what the circumstance is, honestly, you cannot panic. If you panic, everything just becomes a spiral and you will lose control. So the whole object, I guess, of it is within a chaotic situation, you try to assume control by not panicking. That's the best way I could put it. And that initially that actually saved my life of being calm. We're taught as EMTs and paramedics to be calm under that fire. When that fire is put underneath your butt and you got to do what you got to do, basically you got to use that skill to just be calm, be assertive, go through your steps. Hey, this is going on, let it register, and don't stay stuck, keep moving. Just like if you have a car wreck And that car wreck, when you have to bring out that when you have to put on the neck brace and all that stuff, and you have to go through your protocols, you just can't stay there because this person's life is in danger. So you need to move, 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 move. If you stay in that situation, you will not help yourself nor the person that is in danger. So the best thing I can say is just be calm.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you also referred to something that we say a lot, which is if you do mental preparation for anything, whether it's mental preparation for the violent encounter, mental preparation for the car crash, whatever we do once we train the brain, we don't freeze. We're more apt to move. We're more apt to be in some form of control because I can't control everything else, but I surely can control me. And that's certainly an important piece of advice. So how's the baby?
The baby is getting fat. She's incredible. I feel so blessed to have her. And that I'm alive, man. That I can enjoy the company of my daughter. And I'll never forget, obviously, what happened to me because, she was born on October 9th. On October 9th, I got stabbed and I was dying. So I'll never forget it.
Yeah, and so that's what greater gift than life ×2 on a birthday. You know what I mean? I mean that's pretty something. So I know we've never talked about this part. I was going to kind of throw you under the bus with this, but how was your fiance in this? Because was she originally mad? I mean, did anybody let her know that you were also in the hospital, or did they wait to tell her any of this stuff? I mean, was she going to strangle you because you weren't there? I mean, how did this all play out?
So the funny thing is that when this whole thing was happening to me, I remember I asked her, so what was going through her head? She said, well, maybe he had the baby with me and he felt that the baby was too much, so he bailed out. So that was her initial reaction. And she was like any woman I would gather, she was angry. I would be angry too if I was in her shoes. So nobody got in contact with her. The cops had actually taken away all my property, which was the worst. They had taken away my phone. And when I came to from the operation, I was like, where is my cell phone? Because technology messes up mentally. We don't have to store numbers in here anymore. We store them in the phone. So right. I really didn't recall. I couldn't recall. I know her number by heart, but I couldn't recall it, I guess because of what happened. So I'm trying to remember her number. I couldn't remember her number. Nobody can get in contact with her. I'm like, oh my God, she's going to freak out. I'm freaking out. And finally, the detectives, they told me that they would get me my phone. When I finally called her and told her what happened, she was in 100% complete shock. She couldn't even, I guess it wasn't registering. And then she was like, oh my God, he was almost stabbed. He was almost killed.
So, because the baby obviously was already, your daughter was born by the time you were able to speak to her.
Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, I saw her 4 days after I got out of the hospital. And I spent about a week in the hospital.
Okay. And so you said now, though, we were talking during, like, it's now with your recovery process, 2 months out, that they really don't necessarily have any more follow-ups for you. They were just kind of like, look, hey, before you go back to BJJ and rolling real heavy, take it easy. And is that kind of like where you're at now, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird to me that they just told me, like, listen, you don't need any therapy, any physical therapy or anything like that, because everything's good. So I don't know how that happened, but thank God it did. Yeah, and they just were like, all right, dude, you're good. Pack you up, and here you go, pat on the butt. There you go. Go out into the real world and enjoy yourself. That's pretty much what they did. And
do you not sit there and scratch your head? I mean, when you look at the big picture, and I mean, you look at the to me, it still just blows my mind how quickly it all happened and how quickly you're healthy again. And then it's like, dude, you're like a cat. I mean, you must have like 8 more lives to go or something. But that is like, to me in my mind, and especially dealing with all the stuff that I did as a police officer, dealing with all the stuff that I did as a paramedic, and watching, and I'm sure you saw it, especially up in, the New York area where, you might have a crash where there's like no damage, but yet people inside the car are dead. And then you got a car that's mangled and the person survives without a scratch. And you're like, this makes no sense. And yours in my mind is still that same thing. If it's like, you got, God forbid it happens, but it has, but you get, a kid on a softball field that gets hit in the chest with the softball by a line drive or something and goes into cardiac arrest and dies. And yet here you're stabbed in the chest by surprise in the heart, and you live. And then 2 months later, they're all like, hey, you're fine. Just take it a little bit easy as you kind of go. And I mean, they cracked your chest. I mean, holy crap,
Yeah.
Well, listen, man, I will tell you that hopefully that there are some takeaways that people get from this. Number one, if we're caught by surprise, no matter who you are. I mean, I think we joked about it before that I've said, well, look, if I'm taking a nap and the bad guy walks in and hits me in the head with a ball peen hammer, he wins. So there's not a lot that, hold on just a second. Sorry, cancel that. There's not a lot that and anybody can do it if you're attacked by surprise. However, training that you go through, whether it be the EMT, whether it be martial arts or whatever, certain things tell us, hey, look, now's the time to stay and play, and now is not the time. And like I said, for no matter how it played out, I mean, again, for me, wrestling around that in my head of going, holy crap, man, one moment in time could have changed everything. I mean, just a hair different with the blade. He withdraws and sticks it in a second time. I mean, any of that stuff that could have been there. Oh, and by the way, I think you mentioned before that they still hadn't caught the bad guys yet. Is that still the case?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you because I'm over here concentrating on what's going on in the back.
Okay.
Sorry, Kip.
Have they caught the bad guys yet? Because I think the last time we talked, they had not.
No, they have the blade because that's what they were looking for. They were looking for the knife, so they finally got the knife. But they don't have the guy. The last time I spoke to the detective, he said, "Listen, I hope I have some good news for you later on. We have a warrant for this guy's arrest. I guess they're looking for him. But I'm sure that they know that they're being looked for. So if you know that you're being looked for,
so they know who it is now. They actually do know who that person is, or
I would assume so. I know that they had showed me a book of a whole bunch of gang members, and I pointed one out, and I guess that's the one. But I don't really I don't know what's going on with that.
Very good. Yeah, we don't want to get into anything that may hinder any type of prosecution that comes up in the future. But listen, man, like I said, first of all, thanks so much for coming on and sharing a story, because I get it. I mean, I get it as a man. To realize that, well, there wasn't something I could handle, or something that was beyond my control, or I couldn't pound him into, submission, or, I didn't, kill the man in 3 moves after he did this to me. I get it. So it takes a lot, because for years and years and years, brother, people would tell me their story in quiet, but they wouldn't, let me share it with the world. And I'll tell you, if people don't do some sort of, whether it be, you call it stress inoculation, mental preparation, just have an understanding that will to survive, the mental preparation that, look, just because something bad happens doesn't mean I have to sit down and die. Things like that are important. So sharing your story lets people reflect within their own self to go, you know what, well, maybe if that happened to me, then that means just because I got stabbed in the chest, I don't have to die right now.
Right.
Because you're proof that you were stabbed not only in the chest, but in the heart, and you lived. And, this is important. And not only that, but 2 months out of the fact, and you're, looking pretty darn good. So that's pretty great. But is there anything else before we bring it to a close that you would like people to know or to think about, or anything at all? Because we talked about the wanting to remain calm. But is there any other life lesson that you think, anything that maybe if your daughter sees this 20 years from now that you'd want her to know?
I honestly think that because I knew that she was being born too, that gave me more fire, like to fight whatever was going on that day within myself. Like, no doubt about it, how you said, I wanted to give up that day and just be like, you know what, you got stabbed, you're done, you're not going to survive this. But knowing that a little one was being born, gave me more of like the desire to just fight, man.
And anything that provides that drive is awesome. And that's the survival mindset. And so whatever it is, and I tell people before, that whether it be in a police academy and you leave the defensive tactics training room and on the above the door and you smack it on your way out and it says things like, "I refuse to die on the side of some damn dirty highway." My thing was I never told my family goodbye. I always said I'd see you later. So whatever your thing is for survival mindset, definitely, it's an important piece of self-defense, really, and survival. But anyway, well, my man, I really do appreciate it. I thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure this is just the start of a relationship where, we continue to talk. And also, I'm going to be in Jersey in February, so maybe we can, get somehow, do dinner, something.
That sounds good, man.
Because I'll be in Jersey City. So
yeah, give me a shout out. And how long are you gonna be here?
A week. Yeah, I'll be here for a full week. Yeah, I'll email.
All right, dude. So, yeah, let me know, man. And if we can do some training together, I'll bring you to the academy, and we can do some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'll bring you to the academy, dude. I'd love to have you.
That would be awesome. I'll bring you.
All right, gotcha. Yeah.
All right, brother, man. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.
All right, brother. Have a good one.